Good day, electromechanical trainees. Today is Monday, 20th April 2020. This is another video of CI online training program. Today we will talk about crankshaft removal. So let's start. Before removing crankshaft, you need to know that you have to take care because this component weighs greater than 23 kg. To prevent serious personal injury, be sure to have assistance or use appropriate lifting equipment to lift this component or assembly. So remove the crankshaft using rope and lifting equipment. After this, remove the upper main bearing shell with your fingers and use a pen to mark the bearing position in the tang area. This is tang area of the bearing. So this marking the bearing position is for future identification or possible failure analysis. So you need to mark here in this tang area. Here it's written U. U means upper main bearing. Once you remove the crankshaft, you need to clean this. Use steam clean or use hot soapy water to clean the crankshaft and gear. You need to use steam or hot soapy water to clean this crankshaft and its gear. Use a non-metallic brush to clean the oil drillings in the crankshaft. After that, dry with compressed air. Make sure to blow out the threaded holes on each end of the crankshaft and the oil drillings. So we have here oil drillings and the main journals of the crankshaft, and here on the front and back we have thread holes, so you need to blow out this to remove any debris. After this, you need to inspect for cracks in the threads. So check the threads for damage at both ends. We have threads here for the flywheel, and on the front side we have threads for the crankshaft pulley. If the damage is found, replace the crankshaft. If you found any damage, cracks on threads at both ends, you need to replace. The nose of the crankshaft also serves as a drive shaft for the lubricating oil pump. We slide here lubricating oil pump, so this nose is also picked for driving the lubricating oil pump. You need to check this gear. The inner gear of the oil pump is press fit onto the crankshaft. This gear press fit onto the inner gear of the lubricating oil pump. Use a fine Clocks cloth to polish the machine surface. This crocus cloth to polish this tip of the crankshaft. Inspect the front crankshaft gear. Inspect this gear, which press fit onto the inner gear of the lubricating oil pump. Also inspect the rear gear seal on the crankshaft on the back side, and also inspect the front gear surface. Now in the next step, you need to check the Conrad crankshaft journal and main bearing journal. So check the main bearing journals and the Conrad bearing journals for damage or excessive wear. Minor scratches are acceptable here, but if it's excessive damage, then you need to replace the crankshaft. You need to check the crankshaft Conrad journal diameter. You need to check this crankshaft journal on which we screw the Conrad. So the standard value for this is 68.962 mm, which is minimum value, and the maximum value is 69.013 mm. After this, you need to calculate Conrad to crankshaft bearing clearance. This is Conrad diameter. When it fits on the crankshaft, here is clearance between the crankshaft and Conrad for oil. So you need to check this, and the value of this is 0.04 mm minimum and 0.12 maximum. This should lies within this value. So when you assemble engine, you can use plastic gauge to perform this operation. If the clearance is found to be out of specification, means not within this range, then number one, you have to replace or use another set of Conrad bearings. Maybe there is excessive wear on the Conrad bearings, so you need to use other pair of Conrad bearings. And if it's not the case, then measure and inspect the Conrad crankshaft bore with bearing removed. Then you need to remove the bearing and measure the diameter of the Conrad crankshaft bore. So you need to measure this bore without the bearings, and this can be measured with the help of inside screw gauge. And in this case, if this is not within the specification, then you need to replace the Conrad. After this, measure and record the diameter of the main bearing journal on the crankshaft. This is main bearing journal, this is main bearing journal. So you need to measure and record the diameter of this main bearing journal. So standard crankshaft main bearing journal diameter is given here, which is 82.962 minimum and 83.013 maximum. After this, you need to take the measurement of the main bearing bore to the crankshaft bearing clearance. Here they are using dial bore gauge. You can do it with a plastic gauge during engine assembly. The minimum value for this is 0.04 and the maximum is 0.12. Bearing clearance can also be determined with a plastic gauge during an engine assembly. So you can do this with the help of plastic gauge. So if the clearance between the crankshaft and main bearing is out of specification, then you need to replace or use another set of main bearings. If the main bearings size is okay and there is not excessive wear on the main bearings, then you need to measure and inspect the main bearing bore with bearings removed. Then you need to remove these main bearings and inspect the diameter of the main bearing bore. You can do this using inside screw gauge. So this was all about crankshaft removal. Thank you so much, guys.